Hey again, it's Heather. We're just a few months away from season 2, and we wanted to share another podcast we like, Dine with the Divine. In this episode, Ashley interviews David Shi about his book, Spirit Voices, The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism. Last season, we had a quick quote from David in episode 6, and we really hope you enjoy this fun conversation between two amazing practitioners.
I'm your host, Ashley, and together we'll be exploring the magical, the mystical, and everything in between. On today's episode, we're going to talk about North Asian shamanism. So I hope everyone's having a great day, and I hope you're having a great week. And if not, I hope it gets better soon. So today we have a fantastic guest, David Shi. The author of the recently released book, Spirit Voices, is a shamanic worker and folk magic practitioner who primarily engages in traditional North Asian forms of shamanism. He is primarily of Manchurian descent, but it can also trace his ancestry to Mongolian, Chinese, Korean, as well as a little Tungus Siberian and ancient Central Asian Turkic heritage as well. Raised in a household that incorporated both Southeast Siberian and North Chinese practices, David has dedicated his spare time to the study of spiritual traditions of his ancestors and of the greater Eurasia. Now, I'm not going to be able to say this. I'm recognized as a Sagasha and a Ongatagurti.
Ongotengerte.
Okay, sorry about that, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, David. A future shaman. Prior to initiation, among both Mongolian and Korean shamans, David's practices are deeply rooted in spirit work, in which ancestral spirits and land spirits are called to empower all workings. David's readings incorporate a combination of tarot, bones, jaw harp, as well as Mongolian stone divination known as Kumalak in Turkic Central Asia. Okay, at least I got that one right. Woo! Okay. Jeez, I'm so sorry. How are you, David?
I'm good. Doing well. I actually just recently came back from Mongolia, maybe about 2 weeks ago. I'm over the jet lag. I'm back into the grind of work and everything.
Oh boy. Okay, that's good. Oh man, Mongolia is one of those places. This is very embarrassing, but there used to be a show on, a lot of people may remember this, on MTV called My Super Sweet 16. And then they had a show where I don't remember the name of it, but they took these girls, mostly from on My Super Sweet 16, and put them in like different parts of the world to live with people who are completely different with them. One of them, they were in, I'm pretty sure it was Central Mongolia. And it was like the cutest family that they put this girl with. And she's like, oh my God, I have to milk cows all the time. But then at the end, she was like, this is great. The family was like the sweetest people ever. And ever since then, I was like, oh my God, I love Mongolia. Like, just because I saw this like one sweet family and their beautiful yurt, and she learned how to put the yurt up, and it was like really adorable. Yeah, it was like serious. So that is my knowledge of Mongolia. Anyway, so David, I always start with asking, how did you get to where you are in your spiritual journey? How did you get here?
It's funny. I want to say I was called into it, but I in a way, I was almost forced into it. Semi kicking and screaming. Because the thing is, within pretty much traditional North Asian shamanic practice, it's actually not something that we have a choice. The way that it works is that we have ancestral spirits, specific ancestral spirits who did shamanic work when they were alive. And part of the responsibility is that when they become spirits, they choose the next generations to essentially do the same thing. And now they serve as the spirits, and it's a cycle and so on. People who are, so in that sense, people who do shamanic work, people who do become shamans, it's not something that they choose. It's not something that they study to become. It's something that they're chosen to do, and they're forced in it. Now, for me personally, having been born and raised in the U.S. with my atheist parents, I had no exposure to any of this before it started to happen. And when it did start to happen, luckily, the specific ancestral shamanic spirits I have, they're actually very sweet. They're like two grandmas, basically. So they were, I think, to the best of their ability, they eased me into it. They basically them and other ancestral spirits came to me in dreams going like, you should find out more about what we did, what we specifically do. This is something that your parents and grandparents have no idea, but something that you should figure out.
Yeah.
And over time, the thing is, because they were primarily Manchurian spirits, and there's very little written about Manchurian people today, it had to get to the point where my spirit said to me in dreams, look at our neighbors and look to see what our neighbors did. And so naturally, I started exploring the Siberian peoples, the Mongolian peoples, to some extent the Korean peoples too. The Chinese people don't. They have spiritual practice, but it's not specifically shamanic. So it's basically the other three. And it was actually through a journey of meeting people online, then eventually meeting them in person, even just across the world in places like Mongolia and Korea, finding people from those traditions, meeting with their elders. That's piece by piece, I started to figure out what it was that I was supposed to do. And they were actually able to, in a way, interpret what it was that my ancestral spirits were trying to tell me through dreams and through visions and through other, even in moments where I fall into trance and they tell me things. It was these people that I met, these elders, that start to explain to me and what was going on, and things start falling in place. And then step by step, my practice began to form into what it is now. And a lot of it is actually informed by Mongolian teachings, because actually Mongolian teachings and Manchurian teachings are very, very similar, especially along the lines of spiritual and shamanic practice. So step by step, I start to learn more and more teachings, and along the way gain their trust, because you need to gain their trust before they tell you anything. So so that's a process, and in many ways I'm still in that process. You may have noticed that in my introduction that I have technically not gone through initiation yet, because within our practice, we're supposed to find specific teachers from specific traditions to initiate us. We can't just have anyone initiate us.
Okay.
Even particularly with some of my friends and their elders. Funny story, their particular tribes actually used to be at war with my ancestral peoples and tribes.
Interesting.
And to the point where their shamanic spirits were actually also warriors against my ancestors. Initiating with them would have been a very bad idea.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. There probably would have been some tension in the room.
Literally, my friend's elders, I couldn't even go to a particular ceremony because she actually asked her elder if I could go along to that ceremony. And his response was, do you like him or do you want him to die?
Oh, no.
Because it's like, if you want to kill him, bring him along.
Oh, no.
So I was like, all right.
Wow. Okay. They were like, no, we're still not cool with this. Like, oh, okay. No problem, guys. Oh, man. Okay. And we're going to get more into it later in the podcast, but I started reading your book and I was like, man, like these North Asian ancestors are so busy. Like, they're like the busiest ancestors I've ever seen. Like, they have so much to do. I'm like, these people, they don't like, everybody's like, oh, these people, they rest in peace. North Asian people are not resting in peace. They are busy. They're busy picking who they're going to have next, like telling people what to do. I'm like, man, these are the busiest ancestors I've ever seen. I love it. I'm like, they're talking, they're doing, and we're going to get more into this because I was like, good grief. I was like, this is so intense. I was like, this is so much. But yeah, I'm going to get into it. Don't worry. So first we're going to do our dish of the week. And our dish of the week this week was a weird one because I was like, what are we going to do? And David told me some things that he liked. But no, they were like, we're going to talk about fly agaric because there's a lot of like lore around fly agaric. And then a lot of the lore actually does have to do with North Asian shamanism. And I don't know if it's true or not, but we're just going to talk about it.
So it's only partially true.
Okay.
And let me say this. It is barely true.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that, I don't know how or why, but the concept of using fly agaric mushroom has been blown way out of proportion. It's like so hyper-sensitive. Within North Asia, there's many, 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 many different tribes, and they all have their own traditions. Maybe only like 2 of them use the fly agaric mushroom for any spiritual purpose. And they are in the far northeast, like Kamchatka region, like basically a part of Siberia that's next to Alaska, like that area.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Makes
so
sense.
only like maybe two, maybe three, but I think it's just 2 tribes actually do use it, and that's because it grows prolifically there, so it's kind of, it's hard to miss. And that's the main reason that they use it. Actually, the vast majority, and this is the buzzkill for a lot of people in the US for some reason. It's fair to broadly say that North Asian peoples in their spirituality and their shamanic practices, they don't use mind-altering substance, or they don't ingest mind-altering substance. It's just not a thing.
Yeah.
It's a thing, and I know it's a thing in South America, and I know it's a thing in various parts of the world, but within North Asia, it's pretty much just not a thing. It's only 2 tribes use this mushroom, and they use it very sparingly. Like they almost, to the point where it's when they go into trance and when they go into practice, they're still primarily using their tools and to induce trance. And then like the fly agaric mushroom is almost like a garnish, if anything. Yeah. And so that's it. I don't know why, like starting from since like 2014, like I've seen articles about like blown out of proportion. They're like, oh yeah, tribes in Siberia use this, and it's like, oh, it's like a magical thing. And I'm like, I've barely heard of it. Like it's like those 2 tribes, they're not even big tribes. They're very small tribes that use it.
Okay, that's exactly why I want to talk about it. Because number one, everybody loves the picture. So if you guys don't know what fly agaric is, it's that mushroom with the red top and the white spots that everybody loves, and it's very cute. I love it too. I think I have some tights with it on, so don't worry. But also, that's how I know it wasn't used, because I was like looking it up just because I'd heard of this, but nobody could ever say what tribe used it. They were just like, it's been used for thousands of years. I'm like, by who? Like, is it a secret? So that's what I learned about the word shaman. And that's why I was like, oh, it's not my word. I'm not going to use it. But one thing that is interesting that you put in your book that I learned was like, oh, so like this one guy heard it, and then it was like in Russia, and then it spread to France, and then everybody's like, shaman! Like everyone just started using the word, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, it's because it's during the time of colonialism when they were exploring the rest of the world. They see spiritual elders from all these different traditions around the world. They didn't want to use a word from their own spiritual. They didn't want to say priest, or they didn't want to say like, they didn't want to use any Christian or even like Jewish Muslim terms. They want to use a term that was foreign, that didn't apply to them, in a way to make it like an otherization. It's basically like they are not us. If anything, it's almost like, in fact, they use it to almost say like a savage priest. That's how so that's why they basically took this one word that they heard from the Russians, and they used it everywhere. And native peoples in the rest of the world were like, what's that word?
Who? That's so true. Yeah, because like there's so many cultures around the world that have somebody who is like a shaman, like and whatever word that your culture or whatever culture uses, but that's not your word. So it's always like, yeah, what happened to all the rest of the words? There was way more. Like, and we all have different traditions, but a lot of go ahead.
I do want to talk about why it's important to use these separate words, and that's because the word shaman from these languages has a very specific meaning, and even in modern English usage, it's become an umbrella word. That specificity is lost. And in my efforts, futile as they may be, I tried to like tell people specifically what it is. And the thing is, people have become very attached to the word shaman, that when I say what they do is technically not shamanism, they get very offended. So I just want to, and this is from my book, like specifically what a shaman is. It is a person who was chosen by the spirits when they're born, or sometimes before they're born, usually when they're born, to serve as the bridge between the human world and the spirit world, in which they go into deliberate, controlled, and repeatable trance states in order to, one, go through trance possession through their shamanic spirits, or two, conduct spirit flight, in which their souls are escorted by their shamanic spirits to the spirit world to do things there. And that's actually where core shamanism got the word shamanic journey from. And the reason why, and parts of this definition is going to sound familiar to every spiritual practice around the world. So where I want to draw the difference is that the difference between a shaman and any other spiritual elder or practitioner is that shamans are chosen by spirits when they are born. And like you said, ancestors are busy, right?
Yeah.
So basically those ancestral shamanic spirits, they're constantly with the shaman. There's no like invite them in, send them off. They're always around. If you do need to induce trance state to call them in, you're literally calling them into your body. Point.
Yeah.
And so one thing I want to also clarify, because I see a lot on the online Facebook shamanic groups, people get hung up on, oh, a shaman is this because they do. A shaman is not defined by what they do. A shaman is defined by how they are born and what they are. Because if we're defining it by what they do, the vast majority of what a shaman does is not that different from what any other spiritual elder practitioner does, and only because those things are easier and less tiring to do. It's like 80% of what we do is the exact same as what everyone else does. That other 20% is what we are empowered to do if we have to. And it's because of that intimate shaman and spirit relationship. That type of intimate, controlling relationship is what facilitates and allows a shaman to do a lot of things safely. So that's really the difference between a shaman and any other spiritual practitioner or elder. And a lot of what the thing with the shaman is, and I mentioned earlier, it's a relationship and responsibility. It's something that we have to do. If we don't do it, our spirits will actually punish us if we don't go down that path. And also, people who are not chosen cannot go down that path because it's not so. People say we're gatekeepers. It's not gatekeeping. It's we're trying to keep you safe because without that type of intimate relationship and that intimate partnership where they're constantly there, shamanism becomes very dangerous work. And so that's pretty much the only reason. That's why in some of the tribes in North Asia, they actually see being a shaman as a curse. And this is more detailed that I go into the book, but it's part of the responsibilities of being a shaman is that we do need to also not only just develop ourselves, but also keep our lineage healthy so that after we pass, we can then choose the next generation and serve as shamanic spirits ourselves. And within the world of traditional shamans, there's actually a saying that if we don't have descendants who can work with us as shamanic spirits, we actually essentially become stuck. We can't we're actually, as people who are chosen to be shamans, we don't reincarnate anymore. We're in our last reincarnation because we have to serve as a spirit in the next, like after we pass. And if someone doesn't work with us in that capacity, we're stuck in limbo there.
Oh no. Oh,
Yeah.
see, you guys see how serious this is?
Yeah.
Not a joke at all. Oh my gosh. It's like, so it's so funny because I'm used to reading about just like different, like core shamanism is what I'm used to reading about. So then when I started reading your book, I was like, my goodness, this is so much more like first of all, it helped me understand a lot of things. So I'm not even through the whole book yet. I read some highlights and then I started really reading it. But like it started helping me like understand a lot of things about just like the whole culture. I was like, wow, it's just fascinating. And the way that shamans work in this culture is like on such a, like you're just talking about, such a deep level, having to have this relationship with your spirits because, and we're going to talk about it in our story, it gets really hairy like at times. And when you think about it, a lot of people think of, okay, we're just talking about general shamanic practice. What most people are thinking of a lot of time in the West. And people think like, oh, it's so cool and this and that. But like you said, some of these people are like, no, this is probably a curse for you. Like, because they're like, this is too much work. Like, it's too much work. It's too much responsibility. Like, oh my goodness. Like, it's exhausting. Who wants to do that on purpose?
I literally watched a Korean documentary film because Korean shamanism actually has similar roots to Siberian shamanism. And there's literally a scene where like a grandmother is crying because she was praying that her grandchildren wouldn't be chosen to be shamans, but they were, and she had to go through initiation with them, and she was crying because she was like, I didn't want this life for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about trance states. David had talked a little bit about this. In North Asian shamanism, a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, the shamans will go into these trance states. This usually starts with a consistent beat, like a drum or a knocking. And in this time, they're calling in their spirits and asking the spirits. Now, they're asking the spirits to come into them or just to be where they are?
Into them.
Okay, here we go. It's getting wild. It's going into depth. David gives a very good analogy about boiling water that I did not write down. I apologize. But I have written here, boiling water analogy, and then didn't write anything under it. Jesus Christ. I'm so sorry. I'm such a mess. Wait, here it is. Okay. It's like getting heated up, and then the spirit is there and like takes over the body once a person's like nice and hot and ready. Also, during this time, there's spiritual flight. And I thought it was really interesting in your book that you were saying, like, if you went to somebody who is a shaman in this area of the world, they may even be like, we don't do that. Where'd you hear about that? That's crazy. What are you talking about? Because it's, okay, you guys, listen, it's serious. David tells us all about it, and I'm nervous. So it can be really, really dangerous because doing this, the shaman is doing, so the shamans, and you correct me if I'm wrong, David, but they're doing this out of necessity. They're not doing this for fun. Yeah. Yeah, right? Okay. Yeah,
because going into the spirit world, and I think this is something that a lot of people in the West don't quite fully understand. It's exhausting. It's spiritually exhausting. It's like running a marathon is physically exhausting. This is spiritually exhausting. And it's, and the thing is, people accuse us of having a quote unquote irrational fear of the spirit world, but it's basically like you're going into a neighborhood that you have no idea what it's like. You're just going into it blind, and it's basically like Alice in Wonderland times 3. Yeah. That's a bad analogy, but basically it's dangerous. And when traditionally when shamans go into the spirit world, it's because they can't handle the issue in the physical world. They need to go to the spirit's own turf. So oftentimes when they do go, it could be to negotiate, to bribe a spirit, to trick a spirit, sometimes even to fight a spirit.
Yeah.
It's very different from in like core shamanism where people say go to the spirit world and talk to a spirit and learn new things. We don't do that.
Yeah.
It's when we need to learn things, we usually call our spirits into us, and they'll tell us directly. We'll do divination. We have many different divination techniques. It's when we really can't figure things out, or there's something we really need to do in the spirit world that we cannot do here, then we'll go. And it carries a lot of risk. Now, imagine not even just encountering spirits, but the spirit world has its own geography and topography. It's like there's like, you might go and you might go into the spirit world, and then you run into a mountain, and you're like, well, now where do I go?
Like, I've never been here. I don't know how to get around this mountain. Yeah. I know. Yes, and that was my next note. In the spirit world, just like David said, like your topography is different. You don't have a MapQuest or Google Maps, so you don't know what to do. Your phone don't work there. So like you might encounter a mountain, rivers, oceans, all different stuff. The shaman could be tricked or trapped by spirits. Their ancestors could demand that they stay or take them back. Again, this is, you guys, you're going to see in our story, this happened. Don't worry. So it's possible that they could never return. This is so nerve-wracking. The shamans who have to have like super strong relationships with their spirits.
Yes.
So then they have a few different ways of doing this. They can climb up the world tree. The soul can fly directly out of the shaman's body. And even some shamans may have some protective clothing that they wear when they have to do these things. Shamanic spirits usually go along with them. They escort the souls, making sense. You probably want to escort in this situation. So this is a big deal. They don't do that for fun. That's something they do if there's like a situation they have to handle.
It's Heather again. In each episode of Dine with the Divine, Ashley also introduces a recipe. So head over to dinewiththedivine.com to hear the rest of our interview with David and learn more about cooking, magic, and the occult. Bon appetit!